Okay, so we've attached another couple of pieces. We got this plastic panel underneath the steering wheel, and it goes in with a screw right here. And then we got this side curved panel that goes right in here, and it is attached with a screw down on the inside right there. That's how that goes in. The rest is all just clips, different types of clips. Side panel covering the fuse box on the driver's side, on the left hand side, and it just snaps into place. And on the back there you can see that sort of way in the back over there is where you can see the actual clip, plastic clip that holds everything in place and also holds up the carpeting onto the firewall. Once that's done, you can replace this rubber, the rubber on the edge here just fits back into place, and then we got one more piece that goes on here. Alright, so we added this last passenger side vent cover inside the engine cavity here, and we attached a bolt at the back here which we had not attached before. It's on the other side, and then a couple of these sort of push pin clips that hold it in place. The next piece will be this piece that goes on above the battery case, and as you can see, it's just the same type of configuration where there's just a bunch of push clips that go into it, and then the last component is the cover that just slides in and clips into place, and the remainder of that actual rubber housing thing there. So before we start putting the glove box back in the lower glove box, we're going to put this side panel back on here, and there's a couple of screws that hold it in place. One right back here and one right up at the top up here. The rest is all just snap and fit together. There is right down here a sort of an L-shaped slide that you got to put in first before you put this thing back on. When you're taking it off, you take it off from the front, and that thing will slip out of an actual little hole in the back there. Okay, the next piece we're going to add is this component here. It's a side component, goes right in the side piece, and there is only one screw holding it on. The screw that goes right in here once you slide it back in, and it just sort of snaps all together and fits back in. Okay, when we're putting in the actual stick shift cover, again, it snaps into place. There's no screws, but there is this slide component on the bottom here that you have to make sure goes on top of the stick shift itself, so that you get that little orange light in the right place there. There's also this button right down in here, and this is the release for the stick shift, so you can actually pull it back into park or whatever if it gets locked up. However, in order to actually move this, you basically have to have it in the accessory position anyways. And before I can put this piece back in, I'm going to have to turn it to the accessory mode and put my foot on the brake and then slide this back so we can actually fit this back in to where it belongs. There's only a couple electrical components on here, the hazard lights and the cigarette lighter, so those have to be plugged back in before you put the piece back together. Okay, the last little piece is the stick shift. When the stick shift knob is on, you'll see there's this little clip down here. That clip just slides off to the front here, and you just can push this thing up and down to cover it back up again. So it just slides down, that clip slides off, and then the stick shift knob pulls off. Again, if you have issues, this little piece pops out right here, and you stick a screwdriver, a thin rod down there, and you can push that button that releases the stick shift if you need to. But in most cases, you'll just have to turn it to the accessory position to get it to come back down. And the brake on. Brake on, accessories. There you go, just like that. And it just snaps in. There's nothing holding this in. You can just pry it up with a tool like this, with a upholstery tool or a finishing tool, and that just pops up, and there's nothing holding it in there. There are some electronic components in the back of here, obviously for the hazard lights and again and for the cigarette lighter, but other than that, that's the only part of that. The other component down here is, you'll see we've already got in the upper box here. It just slid right back in. There's a light component on this side of the box. You'll see it when I open it up. There's a light plug-in back there, and we've rerouted this lighting component for the lower box that was giving us some problems before. So now we're just going to install that bottom glove box. Okay, so here's the glove box. Glove box has a bunch of bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a couple down here, one over on this side, and one way back up here, and that's what holds the glove box on. And that's back in. Now we're going to replace this side piece, side component over here, and this piece back up in here. The passenger side interior component just has one component piece of the back that's holding it in. This is another one I put in to hold the carpet in, and this piece down here, this is actually just snaps into place. There's nothing holding it in. There's no screws or anything. You just pry it off and it'll pop off. Alright, to get the side console off, you'll need to undo 2 screws, one on either side, and then they're covered up with these sort of plastic caps and just fit over the front. Make sure you realize that if you got the power seats, you're going to have to move the seats forward before you do this. Once you disconnect the battery and stuff, then you're out of luck. Last piece of the puzzle is this piece of interior trim right here, and all it does is it snaps into place. There is nothing holding it in other than some clips. You might have to really put some weight into it though. So one of the last pieces I have to put on is I have to put on this underskirting again. I have to get some new bolts for it. The push pins they had in originally were taken out by Infiniti. They put in bolts that rusted through and some of the heads broke. So I'll have to put that one in as well. And then the last piece over there is recharging the air conditioning, and I'll show you how to do that. Some DFUs I did that I just want to point out. You can see that the wiper blades are too high up. I didn't put them in the right position, so I'm just going to pop those 2 bolts off. One right there, and lower those back down to where they should be. The second thing I had trouble with was the heat, and the heating and coolant needs to be bled. But as you can sort of see right back up in here, let me see if I can get it. There's the actual valve for the coolant bleeding, and the issue with that is, one, that's plastic, breaks easy, so you probably want to get a backup one of those. They're only a few cents or from a dealer. And this, you can see where the coolant goes in down here, and the third place is inside of this reservoir right here. So the issue I had was with heating. It would heat on only when you got the RPMs above 3,000. That's a pretty standard problem. You look on the internet, you'll see guys trying to tell you how to fix this. It's a combination of making sure this coolant thing is topped up here, and making sure that there's no airlock in this coolant bleed up here. Now the issue with that, of course, is that this coolant bleed is higher, physically higher than this thing down here. So if you're following some of the guidelines on the internet, it won't work, because as you put fluid up there, it flows out down here. So you literally have to, I did a series of steps where I would top this reservoir up, make sure this thing was topped up, then put the cap on, then I would come up here and pour coolant in up here, then I'd run it through a cycle of heating, turning the heat on, running the engine, and then lowering the heat, etc., and getting the RPMs up. And I did this about 4 or 5 times, each time finding that there was another airlock in here, and eventually it disappeared over a number of times. So we've now got heat in the car. So that's the one thing. The other DFU moment, as you can see, the car tires are straight. As you go down the road, that's the position of the wheel, so I got to pop the wheel off and straighten it out again. I've got an issue with one of these switches down here, the VDC off switch down below here. Let's let it get focused here. It's this center switch right in here. Camera's not focusing, but it's that VDC off switch is not working right. It has no impact on the thing. It just looks like it's running VDC off all the time. And that is about it. The last piece I put in here was this trim piece, and it just snaps in and snaps out. There's nothing, no screws or anything holding it in. It's just that silver trim piece right there. So these are the plugs for the driver's side airbag. You can see that they're color coded and they slide down in there. And these are these black clips that I mentioned. You have to unclip before you can pull them out. And probably the easiest way to do that, if you're careful, is to take a sharp X-Acto knife and pry those up, and then you can release them pretty easily. That's for the driver's side airbag in the steering wheel. Okay, when you're putting your steering wheel back in, see there's a little mark right here. That little mark on that stud right there actually lines up to a mark that's underneath this bolt right now, but that's how you line it up to make sure it's the right lineup. Again, never spin the clock spring if you can mark it to make sure it's back in its right position, and make sure you also reattach this little grounding point right here. That needs to be reattached as well.